We're here with Ruth Gripper, Liberal Democrat candidate for Truro and Falmouth. Hi, Ruth.
Hi, Jacob.
So what's your key policy?
For me as an individual? So I think the main issue that I think is really important at this election is around Brexit. Obviously, this is our opportunity to have a say, really, and to send a signal about, do we want to go ahead with this, or do we actually want to take this moment to say, stop, let's rethink, are we really sure that we want to go ahead with this? And like I say, send that signal that, personally, I voted to remain. I very strongly feel that we're better off in Europe. And I think this is an opportunity for people to have that say.
Well, there's been a bit of confusion around the Liberal Democrat policy. You came out quite unequivocally to revoke Article 50, but then a week ago or so, your deputy leader went on a television news interview and said that your primary policy now is a people's vote. So which are the Liberal Democrats pushing for?
So our policy hasn't changed. We've always been pushing for a people's vote. We think it's really important that people have a chance to have a say. We've campaigned for that for the last 3 years. Unfortunately, we haven't won that argument in Parliament. Unfortunately, the Labour Party haven't supported votes within Parliament when we've had an opportunity to secure that people's vote. And at this election, you know, the Liberal Democrats are a pro-Remain party. Like I say, I very strongly feel we're better off in Europe. And I think actually saying very clearly that a vote for the Lib Dems is a vote to remain, it gives people that clear choice.
Well, if you're planning on revoking Article 50, and that's if you get into government, is it democratic to revoke Article 50 and remain in the EU without a second referendum?
So like you said, it would be, if we get a Lib Dem government, then a Lib Dem government elected on the manifesto that we have. That manifesto says we would stop Brexit. I think that would be democratic because it would take, you know, it would be a really significant result if we did get that Liberal Democrat majority. If we don't, then we'll keep going with making that case for a people's vote.
But even if you did get a majority government, that would be on 35–40% of a vote. It wouldn't be enough to overturn a national referendum, surely.
I think in our political system that we have at the moment, it would take a hell of a lot to get a Lib Dem majority government. It would be, I think it would be a pretty compelling mandate to do that. Like I say, the system that we have at the moment, and again, this is why the Lib Dems over many years have argued for voting reform. It's something that has come up quite a lot actually during this election because people are really seeing the effect of our first past the post system. That's something that we believe we should change because it leaves too many people where their vote doesn't matter. We have a lot of safe seats where actually how you work as an MP, no matter how hard you work or whether you don't, actually you're going to get back in. And then others where they are really marginal. So we've campaigned for voting reform. It's interesting now that other parties are perhaps starting to see the benefits of that.
Well,
but like I say, within our system, I think if we got a Lib Dem majority government, that would be a hell of a swing. That would be a compelling case.
But you're saying that's not very likely.
So, like I say, you are elected on your manifesto as a political party. Our manifesto says that we would stop Brexit.
So it's not very likely that there'll be a Lib Dem majority government, you'd say.
Well, we'll see what happens on December the 12th, but. You know, from our starting position, it would be a significant shift.
OK, well, if there isn't, you're pushing for a second referendum, a people's vote.
Yeah, we will keep making that
So
case.
if there was this second referendum, you succeeded in your campaign, and the vote came back to leave again, would the Liberal Democrats accept that result?
So Joe Swinson has said that we would honour that.
How would you honour that?
I think the focus for us now is about firstly securing that people's vote because that isn't guaranteed by any means. Like I say, we've been working on that for the last 3 years, unfortunately without support from the other parties.
But how would you honour the result of the referendum?
So our focus right now is going to be about securing that vote and then during that campaign doing everything that we can to fight for Remain and to win a victory for Remain. And
but that's not what I asked. I asked what happens if we vote to leave again. how will you honour that referendum? Will you vote for a Brexit deal in Parliament if you're an MP?
So we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. As I said, Jo Swinson has said that the party would honour that result, but I think it's really important that...
But she hasn't said how they'd honour that result, and she's refused to vote for any Brexit deal.
I think it's really important that if we get that vote, firstly that it is conducted properly, but particularly that so the Liberal Democrats, we would do everything that we can to win a victory for Remain. And I think it's really telling that Jeremy Corbyn hasn't said whether he's for Leave or Remain. He's explicitly said he wouldn't campaign for Remain. We don't know what our Labour candidate here would do in that situation.
But we know that, and we know what the Liberal Democrats will campaign for. But you still haven't said how you would honour the result of a referendum and if you'd vote for a Brexit deal, if it came back to Leave.
So we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
OK.
We've said we would honour the result.
So I want to move on then to a bit about Brexit and Cornwall. So how will you ensure, if we do remain in the EU, that regions like Cornwall will get a fair deal with things such as the Common Fisheries Policy, which is a big reason why pretty much every constituency in Cornwall voted to leave?
So it's interesting, Truro Falmouth is the only constituency in Cornwall that voted to remain. On your question, so I don't think Europe is perfect by any means, and I don't think the Liberal Democrats think that Europe is perfect, but I strongly feel that we are better off as part of Europe and that we have benefited both as a country and as a county from being part of Europe. And I think it's really important if we hopefully do get to stay in, that we play our full part in Europe and influence it from within.
But what specifically would the Lib Dems do to influence policies like that, which many people in Cornwall are saying aren't working for them?
So we would play our full part in Europe and participate as a constructive partner within Europe. I think on fishing particularly, there are issues both around the Common Fisheries Policy, but also about how we sort of implement that domestically and some of the tensions or dynamics within the industry between some of the smaller players and some of the bigger ones. And I think that's something that we need to look at both at the European level, but also within government. And I think if we're thinking about our sort of future, hopefully within Europe, and thinking about how we invest in the regions within the UK. So the Liberal Democrats have got a lot of plans around making sure that any future infrastructure funding is balanced between the different regions. We see too much of our sort of national funding concentrated within London and the South East. Now, Cornwall has had huge amounts of investment over the last sort of 15 years or so from Europe. And one of my concerns is that if we leave Europe, is the government going to replace that level of funding? And I don't have much faith, I have to say, in a Conservative government to invest in Cornwall to the level that we have seen from Europe. So the Liberal Democrats, as part of our sort of spending plans, we have got what we're calling a regional rebalancing fund, so making sure that investment is spread across the different nations and regions of the UK.
OK, I want to talk a little about climate change and the Liberal Democrats' green policies. So on, for example, your emissions targets, you've set a target of 2045.
At the latest.
At the latest. But why 2045 when climate activists like Greta Thunberg or Extinction Rebellion and even the Green Party are saying 2030, while the Home Office commissioned independent study on the matter is saying 2050? So why have you picked that date in the middle?
Yeah, so we had quite a lively debate about this at conference, and I think that point about it's 2045 at the latest is really important because essentially we need to get there as quickly as we can. And what we have done is set quite challenging targets along the way. So making sure that by 2030 that we are most of the way there. But I think the issue is that there is, to get there, there's quite a significant shift that is going to have to happen within our economy and also within sort of consumer behaviour as well. So we would, so we've set that target. Like I say, it was quite a lively debate at conference, and basically we've set that with the view that that is achievable. That is absolutely achievable, and we will hold ourselves accountable to that. Again, I think it's interesting that Labour, despite having sort of set the policy at their conference, haven't actually set a target within their manifesto. So we've set that target of 2045. We're aiming to be, I think, 75% of the way there by 2030. And what we've also done is set out a lot of detail within the manifesto about the different ways that we will achieve that. So whether that's insulating homes, huge investment in renewable energy, in public transport, which I think is particularly important here in Cornwall, and then some interesting ideas around sort of how we make sure that that wider shift within the economy takes place. So Joe Swinson has set out basically a Liberal Democrat government would introduce a wellbeing budget. So
okay, well we get the idea, and you've already said a Lib Dem government is not the most likely thing in the world. So I want to talk about that target specifically. It's been made a legally binding target, 2045.
Yeah.
So what happens if businesses or even the government don't meet that legally binding target?
So I think the purpose of that target is about really focusing attention and driving behaviour. And like I say, I think we have set that target so that it's actually something that we can achieve within. So there can be a tendency, I think, within government at the moment to hope that technology will save us and that at some point in future
that may be the
technology
tendency
will come
in
along.
government, but I asked what will happen if that target is missed? Legally binding target, as said in your manifesto.
Well, like I said, we will use that to drive behaviour, and we've got those targets along the way. And I think if it's essentially a tool to hold ourselves as government and different parts of the economy accountable to making sure that we hit that. And
will businesses or the government even be prosecuted if they miss that target?
I don't want to get into prosecution, and
or fined, perhaps.
I think the issue is about supporting businesses to make that shift, because it is, as I said, it's a huge shift that we're going to have to make, and that is going to have to happen at all sorts of levels. And so, as I said, investing in, I think it's about supporting businesses to make that transition. And I mean, I was at a farmers' hustings last week, and a lot of that discussion was about how do we support the good stuff that's already happening? How do we help people move along the way? And I think it is also then about accountability and scrutiny for where people are falling short. So one of the things that we have said among our sort of climate policies is about transparency in terms of where institutions are investing, also about this idea of a corporate duty of care. So at the moment, we effectively outsource a lot of our emissions. And one of the things that we would do is make sure that businesses and institutions, public sector agencies, that they have to report not only on what they are doing sort of directly, but what's happening within their supply chains and
I think
overseas.
We're drifting a little from the question here, which is the target is introduced not just as a policy, but as law, that we must be carbon neutral by 2045. That's going to be a law under a Lib Dem government in order to provide, as you said, accountability. But what use is the accountability if you can't tell me what happens if that target is missed? There is no backlash for that in terms of that accountability. There's a law saying we must do this, but if it's not and the law is broken, no one can tell me what happens.
Well, it's then a tool for people to hold the government to account. We've seen the Conservative government around air pollution, sort of breaking the EU legally binding limits. It then, members of the public can use that as a tool. But I mean, I think we'll be in a strange situation if the government is prosecuting itself. But I think, like I said, I think it really focuses attention. I think one of the things that perhaps people find frustrating about politics at the moment is, we see governments make commitments, and then whether or not they meet them, it sort of passes by the wayside. So
it sort of seems like the same case here, and it doesn't seem to be particularly enforceable as a law. But I want to move on to healthcare. Mm-hmm. So the manifesto is very hot on its pledge to train more GPs, make up the numbers that we've lost under austerity, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But it's quite vague about how they will get more people to train to be GPs. What sort of incentives will be provided? How are we going to train more GPs?
So I think there's quite a few different areas that will need addressing there. I mean, we have a particular issue in Cornwall in terms of attracting not just GPs but other NHS and sort of health workers to come and work down here for all sorts of different reasons. You know, the cost of housing, the sort of the isolation, if you like. So there is something about, and in fact I was talking to some GPs about this last week, about how we sell Cornwall as a fantastic place to live and to work. Obviously it takes time to train GPs and they are under a huge amount of pressure at the moment. So I think the wider work that we would do around investing in the NHS, investing in mental health, which is an area that hasn't had the level of attention or focus that it really needs. And again, that's something that the Liberal Democrats would particularly focus on. And investing in social care so that members of staff, whether that's GPs or hospital staff, are not under the intense pressure that they're experiencing at the moment.
Okay, we're running out of time, so I do want to move on quite quickly. Just on education, the Lib Dems have, in their manifesto, pledged to instil a curriculum for life in the education system. And I just want to ask you specifically about RE and LGBT education. That's part of the curriculum for life. That's something that Lib Dems want to introduce as compulsory in schools. But would the Lib Dems support the right of parents to choose whether children participate in those lessons based on, for example, religious beliefs, as we've seen in Birmingham?
I think if you've got a national curriculum, you know, that is there for a reason, and I think it's important that children participate in that. And I'm actually really proud of the work that the Liberal Democrats have done around equalities and inclusion, you know, during the coalition government around same-sex marriage, but also at this election in terms of LGBT rights. I think it's something that is very distinctive about the Liberal Democrats, and I think it's really important that children learn that whoever they are and whoever they want to be, that's okay, and that there are different ways for people to live their lives. And I think that's a really important part of the Liberal Democrat sort of ethos and values.
But would the policy allow parents to opt out on the basis of religion, for example?
So parental choice is important, but like I say, I think it's important that that children, if we've got a national curriculum, it's there for a reason.
Okay, that's yes and no. Just a quick yes or no. Would parents be allowed to opt out?
Like I say, I think it's important that they have that choice. But Liberal Democrats, I mean, this is something that is at the core of Liberal Democrat values about, you know, inclusion and about equalities. And I think it's really great that the Liberal Democrats are focused on this.
Is that a yes or a no?
In terms of
would they be allowed to opt out? You said it's important that they have the choice. Is that yes, they will have the choice?
So I would have to check the details on that. Like I say, I think it's important that I mean, the national curriculum is there for a reason. I think it's important that they learn this stuff, but we do respect parental choice.
Okay, and just one final question on a particularly local issue. So the manifesto has mentioned investment in the southwest and so on, but what level of devolution, for example, is supported? I mean, the Greens are offering a referendum on a Cornish Assembly. Is that something the Lib Dems might be interested in?
So we're really interested in devolution and have committed to a Cornish Assembly.
Would that be introduced by referendum, or?
I think we'd have to look at that sort of, as I say, if we're in the situation of a Lib Dem government. There's different ways you could go about it. But I mean, we are a party that really believes in localism, in making sure that as many decisions as possible are being taken right at the local level, because it is people down here that know best what works down here. It's not people up in Whitehall. So we've argued over many years for giving councils in general, and I think places like Cornwall in particular, giving them greater powers over all sorts of areas, because we know what works best for our area.
Ruth Gripper, thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thanks,
Thank you.
Jacob.